Oh, we're recording. Okay. All right. So we are starting now. It is now 7 o'clock on the dot. This is the January 21st meeting of the Flood Prevention, Climate Resilience, and Erosion Control Board. We are starting our meeting now, and I'm going to have us all go around and say who is in attendance for the record. So this is Becky Bunnell, Chair.
Greg Podolsky. Don Lamberti.
John Fallon.
Keith Bradley.
Carolyn Camlett, Secretary.
And Charles Abercrombie, member.
Okay, and then John Dilley is traveling and will not be making the meeting tonight. We also have a member of the public. How do you feel about being a member of the public?
I love it.
There's a seat right here next to me.
Nope, I'm in the Peter. I'm loving it.
All right, thank you all. We will start the meeting now. I will call the meeting to order, and we will go over the first agenda item, which is to hear, consider, and act upon the minutes of the December 17th, 2024 meeting. I have an extra copy if everyone did not get a chance to read through them, if anyone wants to review them.
No, I thought I had it on my computer, but I don't.
Does anyone who has so far read them have any comments or edits that they would like to suggest?
Yeah, I have one, and it applies to several of the documents, but in particular the draft, and that is, we are the flood prevention, not flood protection.
Oh, God, that is me writing that wrong.
Climate Resilience and Erosion Control Board. That also appears in the agenda and in a couple of places on your letter that we're going to talk about later.
Yes, thank you for that.
So, to be
considered. Prevention, I see it, okay.
Other than that, I don't have any.
And I have already given my comments to Prue.
Okay, I'm sorry. Was prevention? Was that the only correction?
Right.
Yeah, it's in two places, in the heading and in the top line of the minute. But other than that.
Oh. Okay, great. I got those. Thank you so much.
And I am not hearing any other comments. Are there any other comments?
No.
All right. Hearing none, can I hear a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
I'll make a motion.
Chuck made a motion.
Probably making the motion.
Can we hear a second?
Second.
John made a second. Any discussion?
No.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So moved. All right. We will now do the next agenda item, which is to review the FIRB feedback on the Penfield Pavilion resiliency. And there are two things that we're going to talk about there. One is just the status of what the Penfield Pavilion remediation project is. They are pretty much completed. They expect to be completed by the end of this month to all extents and purposes. Largely completed is the language that is being used. They are doing the decking and ramps right now. They've already paved the driveway area. I don't think they will probably do the planting. The construction plans called out for planting in the sidewalk side of the building, which they probably won't do until the spring, my guess is. It's probably not a good time to plant now. But their proposal right now is to largely complete the job and then get FEMA in for a walkthrough. And once FEMA has approved it, they would then make a request to remove the notice of violation. And that's...
Did they keep within budget?
They did keep within budget, and they kept within the 50% rule. For those of you that aren't aware, there is sort of a guideline, if you will, a FEMA guideline within the coastal area, that if you do a construction project and renovate a building, and you spend more than 50% the cost of the building structure itself, not the building and land, but the building structure itself, you must elevate it to FEMA elevation. And this building is not at FEMA elevation, it's 1 foot lower. So they stayed under the 50% guideline. This was a discussion with FEMA. There were certain things that were taken out that allowed them to stay under, but FEMA approved it, and so they have received a confidence level from FEMA that they will not be penalized. They will stay within the 50%. So hopefully the notice of violation will be lifted sometime in early spring once FEMA does their walkthrough. I don't know how long it actually takes once we submit the request for the removal of the notice of violation. I'm assuming that should be a matter of hopefully weeks.
Oh, years.
It's not like Army Corps. It's not Army Corps.
You're an optimist.
I'm a realist.
But so the notice of violation is very important. It's very important because the town does not want to do any remediation efforts on the building site until the notice of violation has been officially removed by FEMA. So some of the things we had done, as you recall, we had the town had authorized a $100,000 project to look at remediation efforts for the pavilion site. Since we're taking the elevation down to elevation 8, the now floodwaters will flow through much more quickly and hit the neighborhoods behind. So we basically commissioned Race Engineering to do a project that would look at what the impact of that flooding is and come up with several different remediation designs to mitigate that flooding. That project is on hold right now until the notice of violation has been satisfied, and then we will presumably restart that project.
What was the violation?
So basically what happened is we filed I want to say it's a 680 notice that said that when Sandy basically damaged the building, FEMA determined that it had such substantial damage that it had to be completely rebuilt. And we actually submitted a proposal, a 680 proposal for it to be rebuilt.
What's the 680 proposal?
That's just one of the FEMA forms, I think, we could have either chose to rebuild it or to completely rebuild it, tear it down and rebuild, or to remediate it and renovate it. We then, after looking at it, decided that no, we actually would like to, instead of tearing it down and completely rebuild, we would actually like to renovate it and move part of it to the parking lot. So we filed an amendment to that 680 proposal. We filed it, and then we started the work on it. FEMA said you can't start the work until we approve it, your amendment, but we didn't listen, and the town proceeded to do the work, with the result that we basically were not able to get the FEMA funds that we had submitted as a post-Sandy relief. So the town lost about $4.5 million that would have gone towards paying for that renovation. Then they had other things, but the main reason they gave us the notice of violation is that they said that the actual grade level beneath the pavilion had to be natural grade, and we had put in sort of a wooden bulkhead, which had elevated the grade to about a 10 to 11 foot grade because it created sand. And we had gotten actually permission from DEEP to do that originally, but then DEEP rescinded the permission. But we had it there, and so we had higher elevation. So when we redid the pavilion and renovated it, we put our grade beams in at 10 feet 7 inches, which is above the 8 to 9 foot natural grade that FEMA said it should be. So we then had a obstruction, and FEMA has a rule that's, I've forgotten what it's, Rule 44 or something like that, that says you cannot have obstruction underneath a structure that's in the VE zone. It's in a VE zone.
What's a V zone?
VE zone is a high velocity zone.
High wave action.
Because basically they don't want anything to obstruct the flow of water under the building. And they're saying that the grade beams had to be at or lower than natural grade. And they're saying at or lower than the natural grade, which they're saying was 8 to 9 feet. And ours were at 10.7. So that would then be considered an obstruction. So that was the main reason for the notice of violation. That and the fact that we had put too much fill under the building, because we obviously had fill up to the 10.7, because we put fill from the
But
fill pile.
you can't build on, you
You
can't
can't
build
put
on
fill,
fill in a
you
B
can't build fill
zone.
in a B zone. You can put fill in for landscaping only.
Just curious, I don't know how to do with this, we put the beam down, did the level of the building change at all though, the floor level?
No, we did not change it, and that's right.
They just moved the beam up?
So when we did the remediation, what we did is we kept the building as it was, so I think it was 13.5 or something, and it should have been 14.5 or something maybe, I might have those numbers wrong, but, and our grade beams were 10.7, so we just kept the building as it was. We cut out the grade beams, we put in helical piles instead of concrete grade beams, so that they were just sort of piles going down, and then we put sort of attachments to attach to the helical piles. We didn't have to change the locker room side because it already had just wood pilings, and so the water could flow under that. Anyway, so that's where we are. The good news is we are fairly confident that FEMA will be positive towards this. We've been very good about giving them pictures and photos and keeping them along the way the whole time. So we do think that they will say yes. If it does take a long time, then maybe I'm a little overconfident saying that we're going to get the notice of violation lifted in the spring, but that's my hope. So that's sort of where we stand, which is really good. However, there right now, the likelihood of having any resiliency mitigation efforts to protect the neighborhood behind Penfield is probably a year and a half away. And the reason I say that is we do have that $100,000 study, which as soon as the notice of violation is satisfied, we can go back and restart. We will then have conceptual drawings, and these are 10% design level concept drawings, so they're not like permit ready at this point. We would then have to align as a group what kind of remediation it would be. Some of them could be putting a dune in the front, some could be raising the road a little bit on the backside, maybe putting a small wall. I mean, there's all sorts of different ways you can mitigate flooding for that site. And we have to sort of pick which one, and then we have to do the design level drawings and permit ready designs. Then we have to get permits from DEEP, probably from Army Corps, which can take months, as we know from some of our other projects, and many months in some cases, hopefully not, but it could take many months. And then we put it out for bid, and then we have to construct it. So we're talking a minimum of a year and a half before there is any kind of what I call more permanent flood mitigation at that
DEEP
site.
generally frowns on structural improvements.
Nature-based solutions is the game that they would be accepting. But a dune could be considered a nature-based solution.
Yeah, a dune is not considered structural.
And frankly, if we
The
were...
seawall is.
But if we were to raise the road, that's actually in an AE zone, because if you look at where the line from the VE to AE is, which allows you a little more flexibility in terms of the kinds of things you can do. So
when all these options come back, who decides? This board decides what's going to get implemented or not implemented?
it's a good question who decides. I mean, at the end of the day, the town will decide, the Board of Selectmen will decide. We will make a recommendation. Why do they keep calling me? I don't know this people. Sorry. Let me turn my phone off. Sorry. We will make a recommendation on what we believe. The project is being run by a town project manager. That's the way we do it now in our town. So you actually have a dedicated project manager who is actually running the project. We are the advisory board that will make a recommendation, and we would be making a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen in terms of what we believe. They may not choose to take our recommendation. They may choose to take an alternate.
And the engineering department has great input.
Yeah.
Okay.
He who has the money makes the rules.
Used to. I'll talk to you offline.
Who have you been dealing with at DEEP?
On this particular, I don't know who, like Diana Skivick was very instrumental when we were doing a lot of the FEMA work. She was advising us on a lot of the letters and stuff like that.
Yeah. And she does have a lot of respect for this commission.
I don't know if she...
I do know.
Oh, you do know?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
She told me.
Excellent. Probably because of Dick. That's good to know.
Yeah.
So I think, the idea is that, it's our role as a board that's in charge of managing the master vision for what flooding and erosion should be for the town to make recommendations. They won't always accept our recommendations, but that's our job as a board. So what we will have is, at some point, we'll be able to restart that $100,000 study. We'll have some mitigation options to review. Again, they'll only be 10% design level. But in the meantime, I had written a letter, which I sent out right before the meeting, so a lot of you may not have gotten a chance to review it. I brought a couple copies if people want to read them. Don,
I got one, so somebody wants to.
Did you get a chance
I
to?
think I got it here.
Yeah, I did.
And I apologize for my spell check. Apparently I spelled pavilion wrong. I pressed spell check and it
I think spell check accepted one L or two L's, that's the deal.
So I'm sure there are other. So I think what I was trying to do with this, and this is what we had talked about in the last meeting.
Let me see the copy if I can, just to make sure I
Yeah.
have the right thing. Yeah.
So what I was trying to do is given that this is probably going to be a year and a half at the earliest before we're going to get any reasonable mitigation efforts, I'd like to look at sort of nature-based, shorter-term, temporary mitigation that we can put in place in the interim, and maybe even leave it longer term. So I had a couple suggestions. One that we've talked about. First of all, I wanted to just confirm that the funds are still available, that we haven't given back the remaining funds, because we did the study, we did the $100,000. The consultant had come in at $78,300 for the project, which is a combination of modeling and the concept level drawings, which would have left us $21,000 and some odd.
Is that the study you're talking about that isn't done because we're waiting for the?
We're waiting for the notice of violation.
So
I'm hoping that we still have that $21,000, because we're going to need to basically take the concept level drawings that we're going to see from that study and then take them to a full design level, permit ready design level that we can bid out. So we're going to need money for that. So I want to make sure we have money in the budget for that. If we don't, we need to know that and start to lobby for it.
So the 100 originally wasn't supposed to be for that.
Yes, the 100 was actually given by Brenda's organization. This was given back several years ago, and it was given specifically to look at flood mitigation efforts for the neighborhood behind Pavilion.
But was it supposed to have the whatever the second?
The permit ready? Not necessarily. But it's enough money left over to do that. So that was number one. Just confirm we have.
I got a question now too. Is that so? Something led to a loss of $4.5 million.
Yeah.
We goofed up and we didn't listen to FEMA, and we went ahead and constructed when they told us to stop, and we didn't stop. So they said, sorry, you guys did not follow the FEMA procedures. You are in violation of our codes.
So that's
That's the first thing. We lost.
The NOV relates to the $4.5 million.
Well, they're two separate things. We submitted a grant application, a FEMA hazard mitigation grant after Superstorm Sandy, when there's disaster relief money, and you could actually say, can I have some of that money to rebuild? And they said, yes, you can, and we submitted to rebuild to the tune of 4.5. They decided not to give it to us because we did not follow their procedures in the rebuilding, and we rebuilt it incorrectly.
Okay.
So we lost the money, and we had to, as a town, fund 100% of the rebuilding.
But then we're given $100,000 because
Yeah,
it's
right
a
in
lower
that.
grade now. How do we keep the flooding out?
Yeah.
There's $100,000 to figure out a plan.
Well, we got that from the town, not from FEMA.
That's what I mean, but
Yeah.
from the town to figure it out, but not for permit ready.
No, it
drawings,
wasn't.
Just for.
It was just for concept leveling.
So, was it an expectation to have permit level?
Well,
funding
the
by
idea
somebody?
would be that we would then, once we got the concept level, we would then apply for the next stage, which is
Okay.
to get things permitted, and then we would apply for the actual implementation dollars. So there's sort of a series of steps you would go through when you're looking at a project. The first is often sort of a study, and you don't always have to pay that much money. That's a lot of money for a study, but we were doing modeling,
Yeah.
which can be very expensive.
But it sounds like you're saying, with the $20,000, you're hoping to do the permit, but there was an expectation before that there would be new money to do the permitting drawing, so.
Well, it
the
was
20
never put in the budget.
Well, not restricted to 20 necessarily, because if they budgeted 100 for the concept and we used 100, we'd have nothing for the
Right.
permit.
But we didn't put in other words, the capital waterfall that they do, a 10-year capital waterfall that the town does, you put in the money that you expect to use over the 10 years. We didn't actually put in anything other than the 100 in. We didn't put in for permit ready or implementation dollars.
Oh, okay.
So we would have done that once we'd gotten the design. Because you can always put new projects into the budget. You can recommend new projects into the budget.
Okay, so we can still do that then?
Yeah, oh yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So if we can't use the 21, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
We'll just apply for new money. Yes. The next thing, I don't know if you guys have been to the site, but the way that the construction drawings were done, is that, you have the pavilion itself, which kind of goes like this. Then they have the parking lot on this side. This is the sound. Then they have like a big construction fence around it. So if you go to the site right now, all of this has been graded to 8 feet. FEMA actually only asked for it under pavilion to be 8 feet, but we then agreed with FEMA on this. So the construction fence is along here, and the elevation here is around 9 to 10. So there's like a drop-off, a fairly steep drop-off from where the sand height is here to where it is here. So I'm suggesting and recommending, and I hope the board will agree with this, that rather than keeping this 8 feet and basically taking all this sand down to the 8 feet level, which means the water will flow through, leave this at its 8 to 10 and sort of make this into a mini dune where we could either do plantings and have some walkways for the residents to walk across. But what will happen is the sand will naturally flow through wind and wave action under, which is not a bad thing. But there's no reason, and then this elevation.
Kind of along the theory of you can't place sand on a beach below high tide line, but if you put it right up to high tide line, and if it happens to erode in and replenish the beach,
yeah. And
well, that's just a natural process.
The coastal jurisdiction line is around here, so the high tide line I think is probably around here. So we're well above the high tide line. And the elevation over here, this is Jackie Durrell. This is about, I want to say this is about 14 to 15 feet elevation, and this is Rickards, and that's around 13 to 14 in elevation. So already we've got two high points on either side, and these they're pretty steep on these sides too. So again, I'm proposing that we sort of phase this down towards our 8 feet and possibly do some sand
Would they allow us to do that?
I don't know. But what I don't want, what I think would be really a shame, because it's unnecessary, that's letting in my point,
Right.
is to take, because the 8 foot elevation line is probably right around here, is to take this sand all away so that it's 8 feet all, so that you've got a straight 8 feet run. We don't have to, I don't think. FEMA's not asking us to. FEMA basically, in every single document, and you'll see this in the appendix, used the language 8 to 9 feet in elevation. So at minimum, let's at least leave this at 9 foot, because FEMA was accepting that as a.
I may be conceptualizing it incorrectly, but with the surrounding areas being higher, doesn't that leave the pavilion in like a little bowl or valley?
Yes, it does.
So that's
A
wouldn't
problem.
that be a problem?
I got a picture if you want. If you wanted to see it, I just was down there.
Of how big the drop off
What
is.
the wall looks like.
Yeah, if people want to see the drop off. It's a fairly,
That's the
it's
water.
easily a foot or two drop off.
It's like a levee down there right now.
It's a fairly big drop off.
Yeah, because it's also built up, then the beach is behind it, so the beach goes here.
Yeah.
Then there's a hill, and then it goes in.
That's
so-
kind of the sand fence is built a little, what happens is when you put something in between, the sand wants to sort of build up against something. That's why sand fences accrete sand so nicely. So sand has actually accreted against the sand fence and built up a little extra sand. And honestly, that's going to sort of just naturally flow under the building at some point. So the next thing, so that was the question, that was the point number 2, is let's not necessarily just cut this down to 8. Let's leave this at that sort of 9-ish kind of thing, and have it be sort of a mini dune there.
And do plantings on top of it,
I would do some plantings on top now.
On top of the existing dune you're talking about,
to hold.
Yeah, to hold it
the
now.
existing.
That little wall.
The sort of the wall, yeah. And you'd have to give some walkways for residents and beachgoers to go to. But that would hold the sand and start to, the
Do they
beach.
have to be ADA compatible?
Hmm.
The walkways
They
to the beach?
probably would have to be, yes. But I think it could be on the slope,
Yeah.
a ramp kind of a thing. The next thing is something from DEEP, which does allow us to do a temporary pre-storm preparation. And they allow you to do several things pre-storm. So they allow you to actually stockpile beach sand on your property for temporary dunes, so that if you know a storm is coming 2 days from now, you can build a 3 or 4 foot dune in front of, we could basically, stockpile sand somewhere over on the side here, and then bulldoze it along so that you basically create a 2 to 3 foot dune here. And that's allowed by DEEP.
On top of the 9 foot.
Yeah, that's accepted and allowed, and they're happy to have you do that so long as it's a temporary stockpiling. They don't want you to have a permanent necessarily, but for storm preparedness, if you know a storm is coming, they will allow you to do that.
What happens after the storms pass?
Push it back.
I don't know if you have to push it back. I mean, presumably you would push it back. And you put it back in your stockpile.
It's gonna be tough on the planting.
Yeah, we may end up not doing the plantings here. I mean, it may be one of those things where there may not be enough of a dune to make it worth planting. I'd have to see how much of a dune actually there is.
You're kind of almost, though, killing the area behind it, like people aren't really gonna be using that area between the building and the dune necessarily, right?
Yeah. Well,
if there's a walkway kind of taking it from, it's almost like a dry moat.
yeah, I think the lifeguard stand
Right.
is probably right around this area too. I mean, I think this is sort of where the lifeguard stand is. And then the fourth area is, we actually don't comply with the town zoning regulations for tree coverage in parking lots. The town actually has a regulation that you need trees, every 10 spots, 10 parking spots, you need 1 tree. And what trees are actually really good at flood mitigation and erosion control. They actually absorb water in their canopies. They also can act as sort of mini little wells, where the water could go down. We have impermeable surface right now in that pavement, and the water will just swoosh along. And, it's not like they're going to absorb a lot of water because the water level is going to be pretty high. But, at least from a rain event and things like that, you'd be able to
Getting
absorb.
salt-tolerant trees is,
Yes.
That's the thing, is we'd have to find salt-tolerant
yeah.
trees. But there are some. I mean, I think our tree warden would be able to advise us on which trees would be.
it really narrows down.
We have several that grow fairly well at the beach. They aren't super tall, but I mean.
Which is what the neighbors around Penfield don't want, tall trees anyway, so all neighbors complain about,
Yeah.
don't block my view. It's like, block your view, but no, they're not gonna be.
The parking lot used to be, at least part of it was like a lattice.
They didn't do that when they redid it. That was actually great because it was actually permeable and the water could go down, but people complained about their high heels going through that. And so we then changed it. Which was a big mistake. So we actually paved it completely in the
Broke my Manolo Blahnik.
post-Sandy rebuild, and we should have done it permeable at that point, not impervious. But unfortunately, we made it impervious. And then we've already repaved the parking lot with, again, impervious again, which is the worst thing you can do in a flooding situation. It really should be. Now, I will say that there are issues with sand getting into permeable pavements. You have to kind of blow them out to make it, otherwise they just become impervious again.
We had an experience in Milford. Subway in their headquarters had a very large porous concrete parking lot, which is really nice in theory. In practice, it was a disaster.
Really?
And they ended up ripping it up, replacing it with just ordinary blacktop. But they put in catch basins and drains to capture the same water and put it into the reservoir underneath.
Okay.
But it was just, Subway couldn't afford to maintain it in the proper manner.
Yeah.
So
our railroad station uses a combination of pervious and impermeable, and it seems to work pretty well there. So I don't know if we could replicate that, but I have heard that sand actually makes it harder to maintain because it gets into.
Does anyone ever check that after it's done, or is it?
What?
You're supposed to, every 6 months, you're supposed to vacuum it or something.
Yeah.
Does anyone check that, or they go by it?
Well, I mean, if you don't do it, the water's not gonna work. So I guess you'd know pretty quickly.
there is a manufactured concrete, pervious concrete product.
That
I've never
works-
seen it in
That works in
actual
beach
use.
situations?
But one thing's nice about it is if the vacuuming doesn't keep up with it, you can actually lift the panel and power wash it from the other side,
Oh.
in theory. and then drop it back in place. I have no idea what the price point
I was
is.
just thinking,
So that's the proposal. So the question.
The other problem with porous pavement in Connecticut is unless you have impeccable drainage underneath it and you get weather like this, you get heaving and it breaks itself apart.
That's not good.
No.
I don't remember us having any issue with the first go-round of the pavilion, though, with those lattice things.
Well, that's different, that's a different.
Yeah. They seem to be fine, except for someone's high heels. Someone must have broken a high heel or something, I don't know. But it seemed to work.
They also make like an egg crate plastic thing that you can fill in with gravel, so you've got the permeability of gravel,
yeah.
but because it's contained in the little cells,
You don't get the gravel
it's got
on the
the
street.
stability.
Well, that would be an interesting concept, if that could work.
There's a number of manufacturers of that.
That's your question?
Yes,
You want to entertain a comment?
yes,
from
I would
the-
be happy to have a comment from the public.
In the dirt parking lot on the north side of Fairfield Beach Road at the Penfield Pavilion, they did install the plastic egg crate.
Mhm.
Go look at it today.
It's a sea of
Mud.
hard-packed mud.
Hard packed mud.
So they have the egg crates, it
Yes.
didn't work.
Yes. Well, again, you have to maintain it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You gotta take the fines off, you have to restore the gravelly texture to it.
Anyway, so the question to the board is, are you comfortable with us making this recommendation? Do you have any edits or suggested differences? Would you like more time to review it before we send it out? I'd like to try to get it out before the completion of the project, which is supposed to be end of January timing, but if you think you would like a week to sit with it, I'm happy to do an email approval, if people would like more time.
I just have, I'm okay with going forward now, but it's up to everybody else. But I just have two comments. One is the title again,
Yes.
but the other is, Becky, were you thinking of putting this,
What does that mean?
I guess I assume it's a zoning regulation about the trees
Soundward, okay.
in the letter?
Yes.
Soundward.
I think you.
That's where right on the sound.
I wouldn't
It's on this
recommend
side.
doing that.
Just give them the number of the
I
drawing?
would say at the end of the first sentence, C 28.11.3.
where is this in there?
I put the zoning recommendation in the,
Or move the body of that to the appendix,
oh, let's move it to the appendix then.
because it disturbs the flow of the letter, and I think, it's a form comment, obviously, but.
Yeah,
I think it's too much for the body of the letter.
I'm happy to move it to the appendix. Or say C. I think it's nice to have it in there because not everyone's gonna bother to look it up,
Well, that's true, I just don't,
but,
it's a matter of placement.
and what would
I'd like to have the opportunity to take a look at it this weekend.
Let's do that.
Because I'm not familiar enough with it to make a reasonable decision.
And if you have other thoughts, if there's other recommendations we should be making, please, you're our resident expert here, you might have some other suggestions that, we should add to this. So I'd be happy, why don't we do this? Why don't we give ourselves a week, to review it and maybe come back next Tuesday, with comments to me, and then we'll do an electronic vote? Are people comfortable with that?
Sounds good.
Great, thank you then.
One question, Mr. Ezra, before that, though. These things we're asking for, like the zoning thing, isn't that like?
They didn't do it the
it's not-
first time.
So that needs to be fixed, right? I mean, what are
They
we?
didn't do it the first time.
What are they?
We
Isn't
ignored
the town
it.
exempt from zoning? Most towns are exempt from zoning.
Okay, there you go.
They try to comply, but they're exempt.
That's a good question, I don't know that. I got this from the tree warden and from, the head of the forestry committee,
Should be
who,
exempt from FEMA too, then we wouldn't have this problem.
the head of the forestry committee and
Now you're not
the
gonna
tree
get
warden
it.
wrote me and said that we should be having these in the parking lot. So I did not look up whether we're exempt or not, but let's check that.
It does sound like it's a good idea.
Yeah. No, generally the towns try to adhere to zoning, but they're not bound by
But
it.
it's also a good idea for mitigation.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it helps, it's not gonna, let's be honest, it's not gonna eliminate flooding. It will.
There's nothing that's gonna do that by itself.
The other thing I don't understand, because these are all asks, I guess, we're saying, how much money
Yes.
is there in the first thing? We wanna.
We would like you not to-
We wanna, put some stuff here to keep and,
Yeah.
we want trees in the parking lot. The one with the sand, though, the way I read that, and I think the way you explained it too, was that's, you have it there for emergencies, so
Yes.
what are we asking for?
We're
In
asking
some
for them to
future-
stockpile sand on the site. The way the deep
But
says,
now you're saying, let's do that now?
Yes.
And when an emergency, see, the way I read that, you're supposed to stockpile it.
the,
Storm's coming next week, let's get the sand down there.
Should be there
It's not to
I
keep the sand
believe
there.
the way the
for
deep
months.
regulations, I will check this, is that you may stockpile on the property sand and create a dune from sand that's stockpiled on your property, and then, move it back. You can't bring it in from somewhere else to create a temporary dune. But let me check that, because I might have that wrong.
So we're
but
saying, let's put a dune somewhere on the beach?
Or just have sand stockpiled, or we could just move sand from another part of the beach to there. I mean, we could probably move it from Rickards over. I don't want to really undo the Rickards dune per se, but we could move it maybe from upper part of Rickards over. I mean, I think we need to look at where we could stockpile it. I'm not making a recommendation of where to stockpile it at this point. I'm just making a recommendation to stockpile sand.
Good idea.
And I will check whether, my understanding of the deep reg was it had to be stockpiled on the site, quote unquote. As
You'd really
opposed
be
to,
making a new dune.
as
To be able
opposed to
to
being
make a
trucked in.
meaningful dune is a pretty big stockpile.
Exactly, it has to be a fairly big.
But then
and-
you're gonna wreck it when the storm comes, you're gonna move it to where you wanna move it, so that's why
Yeah, the storm will move it for you, don't worry about it.
The storm will push it right under the pavilion. Presumably, I mean, depending on how big the storm is. And let's be honest, depending on how big the dune is, it may not completely eliminate flooding, but it might keep it at bay for the 2 hours that at high tide, it's just enough to keep the flooding from the neighborhood behind, and then the tide goes down and you're fine. It's one of those things where you could have a bad tide cycle and it just overflows it. You don't know. All right, so we're going to take till next Tuesday for comments, and then we'll do a electronic approval.
Sounds good.
How does that electronic approval work? How do you do that? You're just gonna send out an email?
I'm going to send out an email saying, here are the total comments, I've incorporated them into the document, here's the final document, please read it and get back whether you approve or not.
So you just send back an email saying?
It'd be an email,
Okay.
yeah. Anything else on Penfield resiliency? All right, I'm going to move to the next agenda item, which is update and discussion on the status of active projects. So basically, we have several tide gate replacement projects that are moving ahead. Perry's Green is finishing up pretty much this month again as well. We talked about Penfield Pavilion. We talked about the resiliency. We did not talk about, at this point, they're doing Southport Harbor dredging. Dick sent around some pictures of what the dredging sand, unfortunately, is not being put back on Fairfield beaches. The Army Corps of Engineers is doing and funding the project, and they're taking the sand and putting it out on the oyster beds. And that was all coordinated through the Harbor Commission, who coordinates town harbors. So that project is supposed to take about 4 weeks, and they're about a week and a half into it. So that should be completed also in January, early February. There is also a project that's not on this list that is a group of Pine Creek residents is looking to do Pine Creek dredging as well. Don, I don't know if you're up to speed on it.
No.
But we were working with a town engineer to get permits to basically reopen a prior permit that was a post-Sandy permit, which I believe we did we had to do a few more testing sites and stuff to be able to do that, but I believe we have all that. So now that group, that is, the town is not committed to fund that, so that those residents would be the ones funding that dredging. And they're looking to put the sand back on the beaches in front of, basically, if Pine Creek comes along here, they're putting on the beaches right next to the areas they're dredging, which will make it cheaper to do because they'll be able to just pipe it right over as opposed to having to truck it.
And we're involved with that private?
We're sort of watching it. We're not doing much oversight of that, but we want to.
They have no money, as far as I know.
They're going to have to raise the funds.
Yeah. They're out of money.
They're looking for grant funding. the consultant that they are working with, Alexa,
Yeah, from Greenwich. Yeah.
from Greenwich, thinks that there is grant funding available, so she's going to be helping them apply for that.
This is ongoing for a while.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Not a new concept.
Yeah, this is, and the reason,
I'm coming into the fifth inning of this game.
Yeah,
Is that,
and you're probably going into overtime.
and the reason the Army Corps is dredging the Southport Harbor is that is a water-based, endeavor in the sense that there is an active harbor there is an active business there. Pine Creek does not have any water-based, it's not a national approved waterway. It is, doesn't fall under the designation of the Army Corps paying for that.
Now, if they could get the oyster people to put oyster beds up in the creek, then it would be commercial.
I had talked with John Short about that, and I actually was thinking of trying to go and see if I could get one of the local oystermen to have their young oysters grow in Pine Creek, which, you know how they sort of grow the young ones, and then they bring them out to the sound and put them, I don't know, what 6 feet under or something, till they can grow to be about 3 inches long, and then they sell them. That would be a commercial endeavor, and that would then qualify it, but I never really got very far with that.
Did anybody ask Patty to check that out?
Might still be something we would look at.
Exactly.
All right, I'm going to move us on to item number 4, which is updating on the master flood prevention, climate resilience, and erosion control plan, which I didn't write out in full, but I should probably. It is going in front of the Board of Selectmen. The final contract is going for approval tomorrow in front of the Board of Selectmen. I fully anticipate that they will approve it. We have been assigned by the town a project manager. Her name is Wendy Folk. And so she will be working to set up a kickoff meeting. And I have asked for the full board to be invited to that kickoff meeting. So as schedules permit, we will get the date that the consultants can do it, and hopefully all or at least most of you would be able to do it. I know that some of you work, so it may be tougher to do because it may end up being during the day, but we would all be invited to it. I'm going to pass around right now the schedule so that you all have a copy of it. We could just pass these around.
Becky, I'm sorry, the name of the woman?
Wendy Folk,
I
S-O-K.
have one, but
I get it.
You got it.
Wendy. Dick, do you want to?
Is that what was in the RFP responses?
It's in the RFP, but it has been moved, here, you know what? Let's take a look at my color copy.
Yeah.
It's been moved back, because it started, the RFP had it in October, starting in October, so it's basically the same schedule, just shifted back.
Okay, but this is the Weston and Sampson document.
Yes. And this will be in the contract itself, presumably. Here, you know what? That's an extra copy. So what I've done is I've given Wendy a list of all of the projects that were listed in the RFP for them to do their first step, which is compile and review existing information. Most of that information, I don't know if any of you guys were able to read the RFP. I had sent it around prior to this meeting. But what we had done as part of the RFP is we'd put together a chart that was table 1 in the RFP that pretty much had 15 segments of the town. And those segments of the town, 10 of them were coastal segments, 3 were riverine, and 2 were pluvial. Pluvial being underpass flooding or downtown flooding. And what we were looking to do is say that this is, the reason we sort of set these 15 out is because that was kind of the way we looked at it in our 2015 flood and erosion control plan, back when we did our first master plan. And Army Corps of Engineers in 2019 also looked at those same sections from a coastal standpoint. Both of those 2 studies were coastal only. They did not include pluvial, or they did not include riverine. This plan, obviously, we want it to be town-wide. So we are including, all parts of the town that have flood implications. But those 15 segments, we've done a lot of studies over the years on those. So, for example, Riverside Drive, Boat Basin up to the Ash Creek area, we've got all these studies that show here's what a 10-foot berm looks like, here's what a 12-foot berm looks like, here's what a 14-foot berm looks like, and here's how it would impact the streetscape. So there's, and, downtown infrastructure, we did a great study, with Circa, who looked at our underpasses and gave us all these different ways to mitigate flooding under. So it's not like we haven't done work on this. Brewster River, we've got a series of detention basins that we looked at originally 9. We picked a couple to start with. We have other ones that we can do. We picked the ones that could detain the most water, which is obviously the way you want to look at it, start with those. So there's a lot of piecemeal work that's been done. What we're really looking for this plan to do is have a holistic look at what can the town do across all of the town places that flood. How do we prioritize that? How do we start to put, a prioritization? We should do these 6 first. Let's put those into our capital plan. Then we would do these 4, and not just we would do these 6 segments, but here's what we would do in that segment. Because some of these segments, there's 2 or 3 different ways you could approach it. There's many, so we need to think through, is it better to do it this way or this way or this way? So the point of this whole project is to take all these town areas that flood, come up with 2 or 3 mitigation approaches, decide collectively which ones we think are the strongest, and then make that into this big master plan and prioritize it. So the first step is for these consultants to look at all the studies we've done. Then they're going to do 4 days of site visits. Again, I would expect and hope that some or all of you could join some or all of those site visits. Maybe you can only make 1 day, maybe you can make, part of the day, but you're welcome. I think all of us, I'm going to make, and by doing this, it does mean that this has to be a noticed special meeting. Because if there are more than, I think, 3 of us, we have to notice it as a special meeting.
Do you have dates on this?
I don't have dates on any of this yet.
Okay.
The project manager will be setting up the kickoff meeting, and we'll be setting up the site visit. So as soon as we get those dates from her, we'll send them out to the group, and if we're available, those of us that are available, we're all welcome to. If you can't make it, we'll take notes and we'll fill them in at these meetings. Then they're going to do the modeling from a coastal standpoint, and the modeling is designed to kind of help us understand, in a do-nothing scenario, if you take the Circa projections of 20 inches of sea level rise by 2050 and the much less rigorous 2100 sea level rise projections, which get very fuzzy as you get that far out. I know, Don.
I'm looking forward to seeing those in person.
They are up. Actually, I think I talked to John. I think they're updating those now. John Trasinski. I think he said that they were in the process of update. They're supposed to update them every 5 years. So maybe it won't be 20 inches by 2050 anymore. Who knows?
It never was.
But anyway, so those are right now we're using state level projections. So they would be doing inundation maps of what we would expect to see at those 2 time periods, 25 years from now and 75 years from now. We would also then layer on top of that what would happen from an inundation standpoint with a Cat 1 hurricane, assuming, this XYZ storm surge, a Cat 2 hurricane, and God forbid a Cat 3 hurricane. So we would understand sort of what are worst case, risk scenarios.
Is that just for coastal there, or is that for all of the 15?
That would be the whole coast.
Okay, but
So
not the 15 sites that you talked about.
Well, it'd be the 10 coastal sites would do the modeling. The riverine modeling was already done as part of the Rooster River riverine modeling was done probably through, I don't know my riverine modeling, CMS Flow, is that one of the? I don't know exactly all the different things there, but they did some modeling as part of that study, so they would presumably be going back and reevaluating that. And then the modeling for the pluvial flood was done as part of there was at least some downtown infrastructure. There was a big study that looked at sort of where does the flooding come in from an underpass standpoint, and they did it again from a downtown standpoint. So we're not doing rigorous modeling for either of those 2. The firms are not doing any modeling. They're looking at existing study models. So they would basically do all that modeling as part A. Then part B would be coastal and inland, what they're calling visualizations. And those would be basically, so now that we know where the water is going to go, what would you do to stop it? What would you do to mitigate it? So they would do 2, we've asked for a minimum of 2 concepts for each of the 15 sites. And then we also asked then for at least our favorite of that to be done as kind of an artist rendering to make it easier for a resident to visualize what would that actually look like. Because it's hard to sometimes look at an engineering drawing and imagine, well, what would that look like in my, neighborhood.
And that will include what it will look like with mitigation.
With the mitigation. Only the mitigation, it would, yes. And then they've got meetings with state and local federal partners. What we'd basically asked is once we had these kind of concept level drawings, we wanted to kind of have an informal meeting with at least DEEP and FEMA. I don't know if we want to do Army Corps or not at this point, but to say, hey, these are the kinds of things we're looking at. Do you think you would be willing to permit something? Feel about this? Just before we get too far along, let's make, they're not going to give us yes, I promise you we will permit this, but they will hopefully give us some indication that this is consistent with the way they might look at things. Or they may say, and most of these are going to be fairly nature-based solutions, but there may be some road raising, there may be some other things that are not, completely nature-based that we put on the table. DEEP strongly prefers nature-based solutions. Well, that's interesting. So they've got the meeting with Stoken and Lake Partners before the Task 3. That should actually be after Task 3. It should be the end of Task 3. So we'll have to move that down. Because there's no point meeting with them until we have the conceptual options done. So that should actually be at the end of Task 3, not at the end of Task 2. So then basically the Task 3 is what I talked about as part of Task 2, which is the conceptual design options and recommendations. Then they're going to do the same kind of thing, but at a much higher level, a helicopter view for 2100. So they're going to look at what it's going to look like, 75 years from now, what kind of, if we really are going to get 4 to 6 feet of sea level rise, that would be covering I know, no, but if we are.
It's not rational, it's totally irrational.
But if we did, and there was if AMOC completely slowed down and the Greenland ice, disappeared much sooner than we ever thought, who knows? This is not me saying this is Circa. So I'm not proposing one thing or the other. I'm just saying we're going to use whatever the state data is.
For a 6 foot sea rise.
It's not rational.
Bye.
It's not rational, in my opinion.
Is there a focus more on the 100 years from now rising sea levels?
No, most of the
category 1, 4, 5.
Most of the focus is between now and 25 years from now.
But
because
storm
it's
related mostly is that it's not rising level.
It's rising level and combination of storm.
Okay.
But I think 2100 is so far out there and it's so hard to predict accurately that's just kind of a sense of. I'm not asking them to spend a lot of time on that. It's what might we face way down the road if indeed. And the reason I'd like to look at something like that is, we may decide that we don't want to put a lot of money into Sherman School or the senior center. We may want to say, rather than doing a major renovation, let's move the senior center up to Greenfield Hills, and I'm just making this up to Greenfield Hills, because then we will never have to worry about it unless it's in a flood zone by a river. So I think that's the kind of thing we should be thinking about as we look at our long-term plans. Right. Would we really want to spend $50 million to redo a whole school that's in a floodplain? Probably not. And that's the for the long-term view. So then Task 4 is pretty much drafting it and looking at sort of story maps, an online GIS viewer. This is just a way to sort of visualize this.
Now, has this been funded, as Task Force? Are they funded right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got approval for this.
Okay.
And then the Task 5 is the financial impact and also the grant funding strategies. So, what is it going to cost the town if the tax base goes down? Like Miami right now has a 14% reduction in its real estate values for a lot of the houses that are right along the beach and even a street or two in. We have not seen that so far. What if we started to? What does that do to our tax base? That's going to raise taxes for the whole rest of the town. And we need to understand what would that mean? What would that mean to the town?
Like to say, I think we're spending money to model 20-inch sea level rise is beyond irrational. I think we should do something which is reasonable, or do a 10 and 15 maybe. So, 20 inches not even close. Why should we spend money doing something which is not real?
It's what the
I
state of
think
Connecticut is telling us right now is the model's prediction. We're using the best data that exists. I know you have a difference of opinion.
We're wasting our money. We should be analyzing something which is real. Tell them to analyze a 10-inch sea level rise.
We could look at what a lower sea level rise would be.
That would be close to something that might be real, 10 inches, but not 20.
Okay, well, let's
We're wasting our money.
Let's look at how different those two scenarios would be.
Yeah.
But I think you have to, if the state of Connecticut is telling you that this is what their best predictions are, I think you have to say, these are scientists who have studied it very rigorously, and we need to listen to them. I hear your difference of opinion.
I believe.
I hear your difference of opinion. It may go down.
Maybe the philosophy might change in a couple of years.
Well, it also wouldn't surprise me, honestly, for when they redo their predictions, for it to go down. It would not surprise me, in which case we would do it to the lower level.
For example, the studies would say it's going to get 20 inches. Says right now, today, sea level's rising at 6 or 8 inches per year, and it's not. It's a demonstrable lie, what they're saying.
It can't be raising 6 or 8 inches a year, because
that's what the model says to get to 20 inches in 2050.
It's 25 years from now. It can't be 6 inches.
But that's what the model says.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does.
I don't think so. I think it's got more of a hockey curve to it. Anyway, I'm gonna put this aside right now because we agree to disagree.
We're wasting our money.
I am not a scientist, so I'm just taking what the scientists are saying, and I think we have to at this point. So that's the HACCP is the financial impact of this. And then we would just do, we had 3 optional tasks on this. One is to complete a master list of the elevated structures, because the financial analysis would change as more and more people in the beach area raise their houses. The impact and the damage becomes a lot less, because the water will flow under the houses and flow right back. So unless you have very expensive Porsches underneath your house and you didn't move it, shame on you. You're not going to have a lot of damage, when a storm surge comes across your area, unless the wave action was so strong, which is unlikely to be an issue, certainly in the AE zone. However, we have we were able to arrange with MetroCog, who is our COG for our town, for our 5 towns. Has a GIS mapping expert on staff, and we actually have a high school student. And so they've created an app for this guy to use, Misha, who is going to go around and do a GIS mapping of all elevated structures, so that we'll be able to actually put a accurate financial analysis on which ones have been elevated and which ones haven't. And then we can then work with our tax assessor to model what the actual financial impact would be if we were to have a very Superstorm Sandy or even worse. So that one I think we would probably not have them do. The next one is to do with sunny day flooding, and along Fairfield Beach Road, DEEP right now has us putting bulkheads down at around the 6.5 foot elevation, which means we are getting regular sunny day flooding, because it kind of flows once you get high tides and high moons and then high tides. It kind of just comes right into the road, and there's several times where in Fairfield Beach Road you're driving through 1.5 feet of water on a sunny day, which is not great for your cars, and doesn't need to be there because it's coming from a bulkhead that shouldn't be that low. And if sea level really is rising, whether it's 10 inches or whatever, there's no reason why, if you're doing a bulkhead that's supposed to last 50 years, you should be putting it in at such a low level. You should be allowed to raise it to the same level that you're expecting for sea level rise to protect that. So that's a project. And then I don't know what town property and residential beachfront concepts is. That was supposed to be a high-intensity wave action study, but it's not going to be a very rigorous one because it's not very much money, but it's just to say what kinds of things could you do to mitigate erosion of our beaches. So a lot of towns are doing things like sills or intermittent breakwaters. DEEP will allow sills.
Reef balls,
yeah. So things like that.
and variants thereof.
the idea is that that waves come crashing into your beaches and crash into it and grab sand and move sand, and all the energy of the waves erodes it all away. If you can take the energy out of the waves through these reef walls or breakwaters or sills, the waves crash into that first. Their energy...
Generally, deep does not like
they don't like those
breakwaters
things.
or seawalls.
They do not like hard structures. Staten Island is doing a really nice job with intermittent breakwaters. So other states have chosen those routes, but deep is not a fan. Nor is Rhode Island or a lot of other states. So
They're not a fan of the intermittent?
they're not a fan of hard structures. They don't like groins. They would take away all the groins if they could. They would take away any seawall.
The trouble with groins is they do a sculpture, a scalloped effect along the shoreline.
Sure.
And they actually, it looks like they're grabbing sand, but the net is you're actually losing sand because they create eddies.
Oh.
So that's the plan. Now, the piece that's not on here that I think is really important, and I want to talk about that with this group, is public engagement. I think it's critical that we bring our town residents along this journey with us. And so I would recommend that we have a public engagement at the very beginning saying, hey guys, we're doing this project. I want you to feed in any comments, thoughts, so that we can explore them as part of this project. Don't come at the end and, after we finish and say, hey, didn't you look at that? Now is the time. Feed it all in now. So I think we should have a series, 1 or 2 public meetings in the beginning. I think we should have another set when we've done the kind of inundation mapping to say, here's how bad it could be. But don't worry, at the next set of public meetings, we're going to show you some solutions. I think we have another public meeting after the solutions, and I think we have one at the end.
But at the outset, what do you present to the
At the beginning, you really can't present a lot. You can just say, I want you to be aware that we're doing this. We could probably present existing FEMA flood inundation maps, because there is actually a lot of viewers that you can get online to show. So we can do a presentation with that. And I think we should. It's a little harder to do the riverine ones. They don't have a lot of viewers for riverine flooding, but we can at least show, here's what the detention basins that we're doing today. We can show the downtown infrastructure thinking we're doing, and we can show the proposal for the underpasses. So we can at least say, here are the areas of town we're looking at. Here are the kinds of studies we've done. Here's the impact of what potentially it could be. And then, we're going to have these other studies, these other meetings as we go along the project and show you as we go.
Just from a PR point of view, if you have a long time between here's how bad it's going to be, and let's wait 6 months and have another meeting that shows what we're going to do to fix it, they should be pretty close, either close together or interdigitated at a particular meeting, so maybe doing coastal. I'm just thinking about how people will respond to.
Well, we might want to take away this one with the modeling. So we might want to do the upfront one, saying here's the conceptual amount of what the sea level rise and stuff, and then maybe we don't come back to them until the concepts are done. And then we say here's actually the modeling and the concepts that go with them.
Yeah.
So maybe we just do 3 sets of meetings. That would be fine, I think, too, and it would mitigate against the issue of...
It also helps you rank them, I would think, as you would see, and you could say, these are the worst based on whatever, and here are the plans to address those.
Yeah. So it falls under our remit to basically set up those meetings. So what I'd like to do is get volunteers to help set up meetings. I think we might want to do 2 meetings at each of these 3 touch points. One is sort of a riverine, try to really bring in the riverine people. But I kind of don't want to make it riverine versus coastal, so maybe we should only do 1 meeting for everyone. But also our town's really big, so sometimes it's better to have, maybe we do 1 meeting, at Fairfield, Woods Library, and then 1 down at the fire station, so that we could, have people, can pick which one they want to go to, and maybe one's...
Same meeting, 2 different locations.
Yeah. So maybe one's, during a daytime and one is at nighttime. So again, you can get people who can't go during the day but can come at night. So I think if we do it that way to try to minimize someone not being able to go because of the time of day or the
Right,
Okay.
or a division of the community.
But what we have to do is get the word out. So, does anyone want to raise their hand to help sort of put together these meetings, find the dates, find the locations, start to put together lists of who we're gonna send these out to? We could probably, I'm sure we can use Bill's email, which gets to a ton of people. We've got a bunch of neighborhood associations, that I think we have the contacts for still. I know we had them from FBRA.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure we can get the Fire Training Center, and I'm pretty sure we can get Fairfield Woods Library, but we just have to get the dates and call them and reserve the room.
When are you looking, are we looking February, March, April?
I think we actually should do it as we're doing the kickoff. I mean, the intent of this first meeting is to say, hey, town residents, we're doing this project. Here's the kinds of things we'll be looking at. We want you to feed your ideas in, because now's the chance for you. If you have some thoughts, we'd like to hear them now, not at the end of the project when it's too late for us to take advantage of your
So
thoughts.
maybe mid-February to
I'm
the end of...
I'm thinking mid-February.
To the end of March, somewhere in there.
I'm thinking mid-February to early March is sort of what I'm thinking for this first set.
And maybe a set of questions about what kind of, instead of just general input, a set of questions about what kind of input might be valuable.
So the people who are actually gonna run these meetings, just so you know.
Right.
We have a consultant, David Murphy from Resilient Land and Water, who is, we have, basically put him, on this project. He helped write sections of the RFP, for us, and he is well conversant with our town. He's done a lot of work with the POCD. He's actually done projects within town, so he really knows this, and he will actually run the presentations themselves and do the presentation. So it's our job to set it up, get the dates, get the rooms, and get the word out. But he will actually help craft the decks and the presentation itself. So can I get some volunteers to do these meetings?
Or I'll partner with them both, want to together, or whatever.
Sorry?
I'll work with you.
Okay, Chuck, Carolyn. So you guys will get some dates and get the locations and to reserve rooms and stuff.
And who do those come from? From David?
I think we need to confirm with David what dates he can do.
Right.
Yes. Because that would be bad if he didn't do them.
When the kickoff is, because, right, isn't it all predicated on when that's?
The kickoff is, I don't think, gonna have a lot of data in this. I think it's, I don't know how the project management team here runs a kickoff. I mean, I would probably do a kickoff very differently than they may. I don't know what their process is for a kickoff meeting.
Who would be putting their kickoff meeting together?
I assume Wendy would. I mean, my goal always in a kickoff meeting is to clarify all the steps and make sure they understand what we want out of the project, make sure that it's really clear, that there's a chance to ask questions.
Is her name spelled F-O-K-E?
I think it's F-O-K.
F-O-K.
All right. So are there any questions on what the scope of the plan is, what the timeline of the plan is, what our role is in the plan, what our objectives are in the plan? Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next agenda item then. You all we sent out the hazard mitigation plan for the community rating system. Just to let you know what this is, we are part of a FEMA flood plan, which allows every resident who has flood insurance through FEMA to basically get a reduction in their rates. And they get a reduction in their rates because we do certain things as a town to be flood aware and to mitigate flooding. So one of the things that we do is that we put together this annual update on the hazard mitigation plan, which involves all of the things we're doing, all of our basically every project we're doing that has an impact on flooding is outlined in this. As you notice, I think it went through
What's the town's rating?
We're an 8.
8?
Yeah.
So it's 10% for every
10%.
ratepayer?
10% for every ratepayer. If we could get down to a 7, I think we'd get to 15%, but, I'm not sure. One of the things I was originally gonna put into this plan was, what would it take to get us to a 7? What extra things, we would have to do extra things as a town in order to qualify to get us down to that next lower rate tier. But so Emmeline is our town champion, for doing the CRS, rating. I passed it around to all of you guys. I did incorporate Chuck's comments, which were to clarify some of the projects that seem to end in 2024, which is already passed. So I updated those. I also put, I felt like Flood and Erosion Control Board should be one of the responsible people in some of the areas where they had listed engineering. So I put FERB in a lot more of those.
Oh, you did?
But I didn't see anything else major. So were there any things that you all saw that you would want changed?
Well, there was one form comment where it refers to the natural hazard mitigation plan, and then in 2 other places it refers to the national hazard mitigation.
National? Oops. Oh, that would be a... Oh, we'll get that to natural. I'll make that edit. Were there any other?
One other comment, and that is on number 4, it's a very small one, but on number 47, which is about extreme temperature events, publicized locations of cooling and warming centers.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, emergency management to work with departments local to publicize information. I mean, we already have the code red system and that, whatever that nickel or NACL thing that is a link. So why wouldn't we refer to that as a most to make it sound like it's something they're trying to figure out what to do with?
No, why don't we just put in there, code red and other,
Yeah, we just got one for the,
Well, we get them for the weather, we get them for
we get them for flooding,
the traffic.
the snow.
Redfield Road is under
Snow.
construction, we stop, you know.
The traffic ban for the snow.
Nixle.us, which is how the Texas company provides you with a link.
So they don't have to recreate the world.
Right.
It's right there.
I
So-
assume this is all part and parcel of what I've always called the code red system that they set up years ago.
I think it used to be called code red, but it's
Right.
a new system,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, but what,
The updated code red system, maybe. What's the
nixle.us.
NIXLE.US?
And then there's a code after that
Okay.
for I get these message.
Okay,
That's a good catch.
yeah. Chuck reads things very thoroughly, thank you.
That's it for me.
And we will get a chance to update this each year, so it's not like, you know, if we don't catch it now or don't make any edit now, and frankly, you know, things will change. So each year we will be going through this during this time period.
But, so what happens now, for instance, I'd asked on number 10, have the funds already been allocated or secured for this microgrid? So will Emmeline update this?
We will, so what I would do is I'm just putting comments in blue, saying
Right.
these are the flood and erosion comments in blue.
Okay.
So anything that you feed into me, I'm creating a master document and I'll just send that in tomorrow. So I got your comments,
Okay, good.
so I will just add those in. So if there aren't any other comments, that's fine too. But if there are any others, if you could feed them into me, hopefully by tomorrow. If you need more time, let me know. But I said to Emmeline, Emmeline needs to get it in front of the Board of Selectmen, I think in early February, so she really needs to make the final edits this week or early next.
I don't think I got anything, maybe I'm not supposed to, but,
You don't need to. If you don't have any edits, you don't need.
so I didn't get whatever this document.
Oh, you know what? This might have gone out after we put you on the list. So I will resend that to you, just so you have it.
Okay, thanks.
I'll send it to the whole group.
Yeah.
And if you could try to, how much time would you guys want to, could you look at it within the next day or two?
Big document,
What?
a big document.
Yeah, it was a quick read though. It is a pretty quick read.
Once you get past the abbreviations.
Said that was my first goal with my cheat sheet.
On abbreviations.
On acronyms.
That's what I have, yeah.
All right.
Well, for fun, it's, you put half the abbreviations in the front, you put the other half at the back, so it's a nice little scavenger hunt. Makes it exciting.
All right, so I'm going to move us on to the last agenda item, which is to hear, consider, and act upon any other business which may properly come before the board. Are there any new business items or any questions?
I have one comment. I mentioned before, I do think out on the peninsula, at some point, you're gonna have to raise the road up because of flooding. And most people, I think, agree with that at some point. And so, I think change of some kind of a zoning change, I don't know how you go about doing it, but like if someone goes, like used to be Joe Biankowski, you bring your plot plan, whoever's doing it now, you would have to show, on paper, just show that if the road gets raised up a certain amount of inches, I can deal with it. The person, you don't have to do it, just show that when the road, if the road does get raised up.
You've got your driveway at a level.
I can deal with whatever's done. So then, if you get 5 people a year, 20 years from now, that's 25 houses have been built to take this road rise. How do you change the zoning or whatever requirements so that they look at that right now? If every year we could change, accommodate 3 or 4 new houses.
Well, that was my comment on bulkheads, it's the same thing.
Yeah,
If you could start keeping your bulkheads at a higher level, it would be.
So how do you get zoning to change it? How do you go about getting it?
Well,
this is what you have to show on paper before you get permit.
I mean, I am a proponent of raising that road because I think it's gonna get to the point where there's a safety issue where.
So planning ahead, if you.
But it could be that the town decides to abandon that road, which is another option.
Well,
Towns do abandon roads, and in which case, that's a fairly big hit on the tax base, because there's 220 homes, and they're all very expensive homes, and so if you were to choose to abandon that road.
How would you get zoning to make people show on paper?
It doesn't necessarily have to be zoning. In Milford, Public Works and Engineering requires that if you have a garage, it has to be a minimum of 18 inches above the centerline grade.
Yeah, something like that, but.
And that's.
Just plan ahead, so 10 years from now.
But see, we're not allowed to do that because that would be adding fill. And we're not allowed to add fill according to DEEP.
But I think it's a good idea.
Did they have that on the shoreline? Does Milford allow that?
Well, not on the immediate shoreline. We got a bunch of finger streets which are well below the 10-year tidal flood elevation. And ideally, at some point, we would like to elevate the roads to make it more passable, but we can't be in a situation where we got all these houses that are built there, you raise the road by a foot, and now all of a sudden the road is shedding down into their garages.
So Milford has done that within the floodplain?
Yes.
And if their elevation, if their grade isn't 18 inches, they're allowed to
they can sign a waiver saying they're very well aware that they don't meet the standards, and if something happens in the future and they get road water, that's their problem, not ours.
But are they allowed to add the fill if they want to get their garage 18 inches
We've allowed them
above?
to do that.
Wow.
Wow.
Let's look into this. I like this idea. So the two of you now have this is a great idea.
I think zoning should be changed so that people must show on paper they can.
Well, we could do the same thing that Milford does. We could say that you have to show that your structures are 18 inches above the center line of the road.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
But does zoning initiate it?
No, it's done through
It's just engineering.
engineering, which is
They have
under the auspices of Public Works.
They have the power to do that?
Yeah. Nobody's challenged it. It was in place before I came in.
I think we should get that.
I like that.
Somehow.
Yeah, we've had to actually lower grades of existing coastal properties, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But I like this idea. If Milford's doing it, then let's find.
I could send you a copy of the standards.
Let's do that. Yeah, thank you. And Emmeline used to work in Milford too, right? So she would know whether that's a zoning, whether it was a zoning ordinance or how it was actually. Maybe she might have some history on it in terms of
engineering standard. It would seem very akin to engineering saying how you have to treat impermeable surfaces and what the rain rates are that you have to accommodate and dispose of on site.
But engineering in the town of Fairfield, originally, and this is slightly different than the bulkheads and the center line, but originally the bulkheads had to be 12 foot high. So when you were going to go do a site plan, you needed to have your bulkhead along Pine Creek at 12 feet. Then engineering lowered it to 8 feet. And so then your site plan had to be 8 feet. And then, I'm not sure what happened, but at some point DEEP stepped in and said, nope, we want it down at 6.5 feet. And,
You'd think to me, if you're gonna put a bulkhead in, that would come under critical infrastructure, which means 500-year flood.
that's where it was probably the 12 feet originally. I'm not sure why it got put that way, but a lot of people now are getting flooding right across their properties on the road because of the new deep guideline, and I'm not sure why it ever changed.
That came about as deep was individually reviewing the permit application.
It's gonna be
in the bulkhead.
Because right now.
But if it is a critical infrastructure, then why couldn't we,
Make people compliant.
maybe because it's.
I don't know what the definition of critical
There's 40,
infrastructure
50
is.
houses.
But hospitals and fire stations seem somewhat different.
Well, roads technically are critical infrastructure, roads count.
So you can show on paper ahead of time.
If your house is on fire or you're having a heart attack, yeah, it'd be critical
Yeah, so
infrastructure.
that's why you raise roads. Anyway, I think that's something we should look at, so, good idea,
I think we have to look,
yes.
make zoning guarantee that you show on paper that you can deal with road increase.
Yeah, I'm just afraid that we would get the pushback, but maybe we wouldn't get it in the main flood area, maybe we just, the peninsula might be its own
Yeah,
thing.
just on the peninsula, yeah.
No, but I'm saying we could do that on the main flood zone too, the floodplain.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a good idea.
I have no idea how to go about doing, who has to approve it, who has to say yes.
Well, I think let's start with, if Milford's doing it effectively, let's model ourselves after what Milford's doing.
Okay.
All right, any comments from the public? Anyone on the phone? Anyone sitting here?
Tina Gallery.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Okay, motion to adjourn.
Second, so be it. Thank you, Prue.
Thank
Meeting
you.
ended.
I'm sorry,
If I can make-
who adjourned, please?
Don Lamberti.
I was talking to him on the phone today.
And who else?
Carissa.
Did we have a second?
About what?
Craig?
Oh, no, I thought about her last night. I watched like the first 20 minutes, and then I'm like, oh
Thank
my
you.
All right, Prue, we're gonna end the call here. Thank you.